Well, hey students, so just because CV-19 is causing chaos as far as scheduling and stuff is concerned, and we are all quarantined, or you're supposed to be, if you're watching this and you're not quarantined, you're wrong, okay? Just letting you know. Anyway, I want to go ahead and continue our series. This is not something that we're just going to step back and take a break from. Getting into God's Word is something that we need to make a priority, whether that is something that is natural to you or not. We need to work to defend our time in the Word, and so we're not going to take a break from our series. So we'll keep going with Save the Date in week 3, but before we jump into that, I just want to give you a few announcements and a few updates that are going to be important for you to know. The first one is that, if you haven't guessed it already, all of our spring break, yep, words are hard, spring break activities are canceled. So we're not going to be doing any of our trips. That's why if you showed up to the church today to go to Robbers Cave, that means that you missed all of our stuff we put out on social media and through email, and no one was here. So sorry. But we also won't be doing anything else going on. We will be doing these videos until further notice with everything that's going on. So be sure to like, subscribe, and follow or add notifications on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're viewing this from, so that whenever we do go live or we do post new videos, you'll be able to see those and follow them and watch them. The second thing is summer activities are still going on as scheduled. However, we are monitoring the situations closely. It's going to depend on what schools do. It's going to depend on what the CDC and the World Health Organization give us to do and those things to follow. So we're going to be paying attention to that really closely. But I will tell you this, as of right now, they are still scheduled, but we will let you know beginning of May whether or not our Falls Creek, Super Summer, some individual mission things that we have going on, whether or not those things will still go on as planned or if the schedule will be altered. So again, stay tuned for that, and we will try to get you that information as soon as possible, but we definitely will reevaluate the beginning of May. And the third one, and this is really important, seniors. If you are graduating this year, I need 3 photos from you. The first photo needs to be a baby photo. It doesn't have to necessarily be a baby photo, but like baby, toddler, super early years. And then the last photo that I need from you is a senior picture. If you didn't get to take senior pictures, just go and snap a selfie and send it to me. The other photo is going to be somewhere in the middle. So it can be your younger, like 4th, 5th, 6th grade or something like that, or it can be a middle school photo. Usually the more awkward they are, the funnier they are. It's up to you though. If you want it to be super, like your glamour shot, go ahead and send that. It's fine, whatever, do you. So that date for our Senior Sunday, we are going to continue to reevaluate because of right now it looks like there may be some issues with that going on. So we will let you know as soon as possible within the next week or two if our stuff has to adjust, and I will get you guys that information just as soon as I absolutely can. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and get our video rolling. So, okay, my 3 announcements are done. I'm going to take a drink out of my super awesome Darth Vader mug and we will continue on. So, if you've got your Bibles, and you literally have no excuse to not have your Bible with you because you've got a phone or you've got your actual hard copy Bible, go ahead and open up to 2 Samuel. That's in the Old Testament. So we've been talking about dating, and I think we really need to remember our definition of dating, right? So our definition of dating is being in a relationship where the other person means more than just a good friend, right? The other person is more than just someone who you like to hang out with. It's more than just someone you spend time with. It's more than that. And even though you may not call it dating, you may have a different term for it, our definition for dating is going to be being with someone, a relationship, whatever that looks like, who means more than just a good friend. So whether you call it you're just texting, or you're just hanging out, or you're just talking, whatever it is, that's our definition of dating, okay? So we're going to use that. The first week we talked about, when it comes to dating, becoming the right person is more important than finding the right person, right? The idea behind that was that if everyone is looking for, that love is patient, love is kind of person, we need to become that kind of person. Logically, it just makes sense. Not only does Scripture tell us to do that, but logically, if people are looking for someone who is kind, someone who is patient, someone who is loving, someone who is caring, someone who is compassionate, then it makes sense for us to try and become that person. It doesn't happen overnight. And so many of you, most of you, instead of trying to find that person, you need to become that person. And so we looked at the Proverbs that says that it's to build the ground first and to do the groundwork and then build the house on top of that. And so to apply that to our dating lives, that means that we need to lay the foundation of who we are before we start building this house of a dating, marriage, relationship kind of thing going on. So the second week we talked about not making anyone your everyone. Don't make one individual person your everything. And then we talked about all of the pitfalls that come with that and the isolation that people get themselves into and how brokenness stems from being infatuated with someone. And we talked about what the difference was between having an interest in a person, which is completely fine, versus going crazy and having this absolute stalker mentality and having an infatuation. So what needs to happen in our lives is for us to surround ourselves with people that love us and care about us, to let us know when we're trending into the line of infatuation versus just having an interest, right? We talked about how liking someone's Instagram photo, that's just an interest. Liking every single photo from now until the beginning of Instagram is an infatuation. And even some people, the things that they do in dating relationships, even is grounds for protective orders against people. And sometimes that line can be very thin and we don't see when we've tipped over into the other side. And so it's incredibly important for you to have people around you that love you and care about you, that you trust, to help you navigate that well. So today we're going to be in 2 Samuel, we're going to talk about what it means to be honest with yourself, especially when it comes to dating. So with the progression of the series, we're talking about how you have worked to become the kind of person that is worth dating, right? The kind of person that you want to date. You've done the groundwork, and then you've moved into an area where now you're starting to see that person that you want to date, and you've sparked this interest, and you've got people around you that are helping you navigate interest versus infatuation. But how do you walk through in that dating relationship of making sure that you don't step over the line and just get into all kinds of ridiculousness and messes and just trash that you could absolutely regret for the rest of your life? And so that's what we're going to look at today. So we all have that person that we know who, when they get into a dating relationship, it seems like all common sense just gets absolutely thrown out the window. Like we have a general understanding, and I think this is true of all humans. This is not you individually, okay? But it could be you individually. You're just a part of a larger group. So we get into this area of our lives where we have relationships all around us. We have friends, we have close friends, we have teammates. Some of you have work associates, you have peers at school, and we navigate those relationships well. And we understand common sense and how to be in a relationship with somebody that's just a friend. But whenever it comes to dating relationships, it's like common sense just gets absolutely thrown out the window. And I want you to know that when you're in a dating relationship, it's super easy to lose common sense. And you're not alone. And you've probably absolutely seen this with a friend that you know. They're really smart when it comes to lives, when it comes to their life and navigating the world around them. But when they start dating someone, it's like they just go absolutely dumb. Right? And you're probably thinking of somebody right now. I've got two friends on my mind. The second that I started putting this stuff together and studying it, it just immediately had two people that popped into my mind. So the person for you, if you don't know who they are, you don't know what this looks like, let me give you an example. A friend who says something along the lines like, I've never dated somebody like this before. We just have something so incredibly special. Okay, first of all, no. You don't. Okay, everyone says that, especially when it's their true love. Or they say something like this: I know that most high school relationships don't last, and go into marriage, but we're different than that. Okay, we're just different. All right, no, you're not. All right, the statistics on that are so incredibly ridiculous. So this idea of bleeding into infatuation steps in. We go from interest toward infatuation. And then there's an isolation that occurs of people around. And so instead of having people input into your life, you now are starting to make decisions on your own. And then all of a sudden, we get to this area where all common sense is absolutely gone. Maybe you hear the girl say like, oh, there's nothing going on between us. We're just hanging out. We're just friends. But then they're literally spending every moment together, abandoning their friends and doing nothing but hanging out with one another and joking and laughing and the shoulder touches and the brushing the hair behind that. Like, you're not fooling anyone. We know, we get it. Maybe you hear him say something like, I don't know, I'm beating a dead horse, moving on. Okay, so the idea here is that we can lose all common sense when it comes to dating. Let me ask you a question. When our friends lose absolute common sense in a relationship, do we try to help? Like if you are talking to your friend and you know that they are just doing stupid stuff in a relationship, do you try to help them see that? So I don't know what you're thinking right now, but I would guess that you would say, yeah, I would want to help my friends. Right? Because sometimes it's just sad when you see what they're doing. We watch people make bad decisions and we think, why would you do that? Right? Like all horror movies, don't go up the stairs. That's the absolute wrong place for you to go. At no point should you try to run up the stairs away from the phone or, instead of maybe, out the back door to your car, get into it and drive to a police station. No, you run upstairs where you have no exit. I mean, it just drives me absolutely insane. But when our dating relations come about, we see our friends do that and we think, why in the world are you doing something this incredibly stupid? It just makes absolutely no sense. Don't you know that this always ends in heartbreak, or this is not going to end well? We can see that. The problem is whenever we're in the relationship itself, when you're in the middle of what's going on, you don't see as well. And so here's a point I want you to write down if you're taking notes. Remember this: when someone can't see a situation clearly, they make choices that they wouldn't have made otherwise. When you're surrounded by all of the circumstances, you can't see more than an arm's length in front of you, you tend to make choices that you otherwise wouldn't have. And a lot of times those are really, really poor choices that we end up regretting later. And that's what's interesting, is that although we see it happening to other people, we don't always see it in ourselves. It's so easy to see something being a bad choice for someone else, but when it's you and I, it's not that easy. It's not that easy to say that, oh, this is a bad choice, or I shouldn't be doing this. And there are a whole lot of factors that come with that, and we're going to talk about it. One of the things that makes it not as clear as this: maybe one of your friends dated someone who doesn't have a very good relationship, right? Maybe that person, for whatever reason it is, maybe because of promiscuity, or maybe because of drugs, or a party habit, or a bad attitude, or foul language, or stealing, or whatever it is. Your parents, your friends, whatever, they're not super high on this person because they have a bad relationship. But when you meet somebody that doesn't necessarily have a great relationship, maybe different reasons, but they still don't have a great relationship, because you felt like the situation was different and you're a different person than what your friend is, and the person that you're interested in is different than the person your friend dated, it's like it gives you a different reason to be able to go through it, and you have the ability to just kind of try and use your own distorted logic to reason away and paint the situation as different, when in all reality it's not. Or maybe you've had solid evidence that your friend's boyfriend or girlfriend was cheating, right? And so you go to that boyfriend or girlfriend and it breaks your heart to have to tell them this. Like, you've got the proof, right? And you show them the proof and they acknowledge that their boyfriend cheated. But your friend, she doesn't break up with him. And she gives you all kinds of reasons why. And all you can think is, you're stupid. Why are you still dating him? He cheated on you. That makes absolutely no sense. But then you get word that the guy you were dating cheated on you. Okay, so he's canceled, right? Like he's done. He's out. Because that's exactly what would have happened had you been dating the guy that cheated on your friend. You would have dumped him right then and there. Smart thing to do, but now you've morphed into an area where you start coming up with different things like, oh, he's different, or it was a one-time thing, or we're going to move past this, or he's perfect for me in every other way. He just cheats. Don't be stupid. But because you're in that situation, you can't see clearly, and you make a decision that you otherwise wouldn't have made. So I think that we all have some general rules when it comes to dating. So if you remember in week 1 and in week 2, I encouraged you guys and you girls to start making a list of what you want in that person that you one day would want to marry. Just start making a list of, these are the things that I want this person to be. And so I think there are some really basic things that we have that they shouldn't be, right? So number 1, don't be a cheater. Don't date someone who brings you down. Don't date someone who treats you poorly. Don't date someone who pulls you away from your friends or goals or values that you have in your life. These are some pretty basic, simple things that we would all go, yeah. I don't want to date someone that isolates me from my friends and tells me I'm a terrible person. I don't want to date someone who constantly berates me and tells me I'm stupid. I don't want to date someone who cheats on me constantly. I don't want to date someone who's abusive in some manner. I think we would all agree with that. But listen to this. When we actually start falling for someone and getting those kind of feelings and emotions start getting involved, these rules tend to become flexible for us. Like write that down. When we actually start falling for someone and emotions start getting involved, these rules that we had so clearly placed before start to become flexible for us. And that's incredibly dangerous, especially if we're in an area where we are surrounded by circumstances going on around us and we don't see clearly and we don't have anyone pouring into us. We don't have someone leaning into us and telling us when a situation's getting dangerous, we're going to start making poor choices. Because feelings, emotions, these things start to do things to us and make us make decisions that we don't really want to make. And we start to say things like, oh, it's fine, it's just the way it is. Or it was my fault. Or I can control this. I'm in control of this situation and I can put a stop to it whenever I want to. Or I can handle the consequences, right? If something bad happens, I'm strong enough to handle the consequences. And that's heartbreaking. I want you to think about that. You shouldn't define your relationship as good or bad because of the fact that you can try and make an excuse, some kind of justification about the actions that are going on in the relationship. That's not healthy. And look at me. You deserve to be in a healthy relationship with someone who cares about you and is compassionate towards you. I'm going to tell you, Christ sets the example for that. And if the person that you're dating is not seeking after Christ before they're seeking after you, then they're not worth dating. And if you aren't looking for that and you can't see that in yourself, then you shouldn't be dating. Do you hear me? That's so incredibly important. And we're going to see that here in just a second when we jump into 2 Samuel chapter 11. David is the king of Israel at the time, and he's known for being this incredibly strong man, this guy who is a leader of men. And he is revered by many as a great general, as a great warrior. He is known as a man after God's own heart. The dude has a lot of really good attributes. But he still made some mistakes. And so we're going to talk about one of his biggest mistakes that is really well known, and that is Bathsheba. And so in 2 Samuel verse 11, we see that David is at war, and just starting in verse 1, it says, "In the spring of the year, the time when the kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem." That's a big deal. David remained in Jerusalem. See, back then it wasn't it wasn't kind of like a system that we're used to now. So if we go to war with somebody, the president will deploy troops to an area, but the president is not on the front lines leading troops in battle. He stays back, and he has people around him that work, and they make decisions here. And because of our ability to communicate the way that we have, those decisions and those commands get issued immediately, and they're put into the field. In David's day, the kings were on the front lines. The kings went to war with their people. And so David staying back is a huge deal because he's not where he's supposed to be. He's not where he's supposed to be. So if you're highlighting or you're underlining in your Bible, I want you to underline or highlight, but David remained at Jerusalem. He decided not to go to war, and here's the thing, the decision is going to have consequences later. Unintended, but it still has consequences. By choosing to stay home, he essentially says to his troops, "You guys go ahead and fight my battles, and I'm going to stay here and reap the rewards. I'm going to stay back here where it's safe. I'm going to be lazy." For whatever reason, I don't know what's going through David's mind. I don't know why he's making this decision. This is just a decision that he makes, and it's not a very good one. Just even if what we know happens with Bathsheba doesn't happen, it's still not a good decision because he's not being the leader that God has commanded him to be. But as we all probably know from experiences, when we do one thing that we shouldn't do, it tends to snowball and grow in effect. And so here's what happens. It says, while his army is at war and they're going out and doing these things, David is up on the roof of his palace, and he's just kind of looking out over all of the city. And I just kind of imagine him being bored. And my mom used to always tell me that nothing good comes from you being bored, Jerry. And she's absolutely right. I always got in trouble whenever I would do stupid stuff because I was bored, like jumping off of a roof or diving into a frozen pool or whatever. Stories about that later. David is bored, and he's up on the roof, and he sees Bathsheba on the roof of her house. And so he doesn't know who it is, but he sees her, and she's taking a bath, and that's just kind of the water would collect on the roofs of the houses. They would have these cistern things, and so one of the ways that they would take baths and be clean is they would just bathe in these collected bins there, and so that's what Bathsheba is doing. And so David sees her, and he's like, "How you doing?" So he is super interested, and he goes and sends someone from his palace to figure out who she is, and that person comes back and says this in verse 3. It says, "David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, 'Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?'" And so here's what that means. This guy comes back, and he's kind of put two and two together. He goes, okay, David, a man, sees a woman who is attractive bathing, and she's not wearing a bathing suit. She's bathing, like taking a bath, right? And now he's inquiring about her. He puts two and two together and goes, okay, I'm going to present my king with information that doesn't overstep the bounds to where he could get mad and kill me, but I give him information enough to remind him that what's going on in his head probably shouldn't happen. So he says, this is the daughter of this guy. So he reminds David, this is someone's daughter. And then he says, she's also the wife of Uriah the Hittite. She is a daughter and she is a wife. David, don't do what you're thinking in your head just because you're bored. Go do something else. Preoccupy yourself with something else. Bathsheba wasn't David's to have. Like no ifs, ands, or buts. Bathsheba was someone else's. But he still made a decision. And so what happens is he gets her, brings her back into her place. He does not check his emotions. He does not check his raging hormones. He is clouded by the circumstances of what is going on. And those circumstances are, he's really attracted to this woman and he wants her. And as king, why shouldn't he have her? He has complete authority. He can do whatever he wants. And so he sends someone to go and get her and bring her back, right? And so in David, we can imagine that he made a few assumptions. The first of those assumptions is that he's an exception to the rules, right? I'm king. I can do whatever I want to. I'm an exception to the rules. And then when everything is said and done, he thinks what I did wasn't really that bad. Right? So I'm the king. I can do whatever I want to. And then afterward, guilt kind of comes in and he starts feeling maybe a little bit bad. But then he makes this assumption and saying what I did or what I want wasn't really that bad. And if anything bad does happen, I'm the king. I can manage the consequences. I can handle the consequences of my actions. No big deal. So the lesson for David, right? The first lesson, number one, is that he was not an exception. David was not an exception. Just because he was king does not mean that the rules that God had placed in his life were an exception for him, right? Like God says, don't do these things, right? And one of those is to not commit adultery, which is exactly what David is doing. But he's king of Israel. He can do what he wants. He's the king. No, he was not an exception. And you and I have to understand this. We are not exceptions. Okay? Like my mama loved me a lot. And she told me time and time again that I was a special boy and that I could do whatever I wanted to do, be whatever I wanted to become. I could be something great and I could, do all of these things. And I absolutely love that and appreciate that. But I'm going to tell you, in my life, because of those things, and it wasn't a bad thing. Don't hear me say that. But it created in me a sense of almost entitlement that I was an exception to a lot of rules because I was good at a lot of things. That I could do whatever I wanted to and get away with it because I was good at these things. You see, what happened was David made an irresponsible choice and Bathsheba gets pregnant. And see, here's the deal. If he would have immediately owned up to it, that would have been the end of the story, right? It would have been done. But David doesn't own up to his mistake when it first happens. He does what we all try to do in situations where we screw up and we don't want anybody to find out about it. We try to cover it up. And so David makes this choice that he is going to try and cover up what's going on. And so he compounds the issue. And so instead of coming out and being open with it, he panics. And his panic causes more problems. So he calls in Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, who is out going to war. He calls him back. And essentially what he's trying to do is have a man who's been gone away at war for a while and away from his wife come home and do what husbands and wives do whenever they've been apart for a while. He wants Uriah to spend the night with his wife. And then if Bathsheba, whenever it comes out that she's pregnant, they can say that she has been with her husband and it'll just be Uriah's kid and it covers it up. But Uriah doesn't feel right about staying with his wife and staying under a roof in his own home, in his own bed, when his men are out sleeping in tents and suffering out in the weather. And so he sleeps outside the palace. He doesn't go home. He doesn't lay with his wife. He doesn't do these things because he doesn't want to do them if his men that he's at war with out in the field can't do the same thing. So he doesn't do it. So David figures this out, right? I mean, Uriah is being a really stand-up guy, but it's throwing a wrench into David's plans. So David kind of goes, okay, I'm going to alter the plan a little bit. So he invites him in and gets Uriah really, really drunk. And thinks, okay, now he'll go home and lay with his wife. And he doesn't. I mean, this is getting to be a little ridiculous, right? Like kind of almost in an area of reality show kind of manipulation, like Big Brother kind of thing. It's a little ridiculous. And when we look back at the things that we do to cover up our mistakes, we see that we get just as ridiculous in trying to be manipulative and covering things up. And it never goes well for us. But let's keep going. So David finds out that Uriah is not going to do it. Uriah is not going to go home and lay with his wife. David's plan to cover up his mistake, it's not working. He's desperate. So he comes up with a plan. And just for sake of time, long story short, his plan is to have Uriah killed in battle. Sends him to the front line where the fighting is the most dangerous. Orchestrates a sequence of events. Those sequence of events lead to Uriah's death. Upon confirmation of Uriah's death, David now in his kingly benevolence brings in Bathsheba as one of his wives. And we're not even going to get into the deal about how this polygamy in a kingdom is wrong, how he shouldn't have had multiple wives in the first place. But again, just compounding all of these issues, we see him come in and he adds Bathsheba. And so now when the baby's born, well, Bathsheba's his wife. He killed a man to cover up his mistake. You and I sit here and we think about this story and we go, what the heck was David thinking? This dude is supposed to be a man after God's own heart. This man is the valiant warrior. This man is the one who wouldn't even kill King Solomon whenever he had the ability to so many times to end all of his heartache and trouble, because he said that King Saul. And he said that King Saul was God's appointed one and God would be the one to remove him. Like David was such a stand-up man, he wouldn't even take a kingdom from a guy who was trying to kill him because he had so much integrity. And yet we've gone from that guy to a dude that is killing someone to cover up a mistake. Yes. What's David thinking? Now look, you may not go to the extent of killing someone to cover up your sin or to cover up your mistakes, but you and I have to be honest about the things that we do to cover up our sin, to cover up our screw-ups. Because you're all going to get stuck. We are all going to, at one point in time, be stuck in a situation where we screwed up. But instead of compounding the issue, we have to realize we're not exceptions to the rules. And just own up. When you screw up, own up. And I'm not telling you that I'm perfect at that. It's hard for me too. But we have got to continue working on this in our lives. It can't just be something that we just throw over to the wayside and just kind of like, well, I'll deal with it whenever it comes. It never works. Because sometimes we're in the middle of a situation, we can lose perspective. We believe that we won't have regrets. We won't get caught. We can turn things around. We can figure it all out and no one will ever know. Maybe in your case, you're in a relationship that other people just can't possibly understand. And yeah, there are a lot of bad things, but they just don't understand your relationship. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. That's not healthy. If a majority of people don't understand your relationship, it's because your relationship is messed up. And you need to be honest about that. The reality is this. When we believe we are the exceptions to the rules, in reality, we are in denial. It's super simple. We We're fooling ourselves. It's like we're trying to be careful, but we find ourselves in a situation like David, maybe not exactly like David, because you're not trying to kill someone to cover up, your mistress's pregnancy, but we're stuck. And I know that you've probably felt stuck in your life, surrounded by the results of bad decisions that you thought you could avoid. And it's easy to see what David did wrong, but the question is, why did he do these things wrong in the first place? Why did he continue to make bad decision after bad decision after bad decision? And I would say that the reason is because through David's entire ordeal, he continued to ask the wrong questions. Through the entire process of everything that he was going through, he was asking the wrong questions. He was asking what he could get away with, how he could avoid the consequences. Everything that he did was from that perspective. And because he was the only person speaking into his decisions, he was unable to see the things that were wrong that wouldn't hold up to a litmus test. And he was able to excuse all kinds of bad decisions. Because he had no one pouring into his decision-making process, he was able to justify and excuse his reasoning for doing really bad things. And you and I are no different. If we don't have somebody pouring into us and being a part of our decision making, we will make time and time again really bad decisions, but we'll have really good reasons why we made the bad decisions. Are you following me with that? We have to have somebody with us. Because when we believed we're the exception to the rule, we can justify dang near anything. And we tell ourselves it's okay the entire time. I want you to understand something. The tendency to justify bad decisions doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a normal person. We all have those things that we want to do that we try to justify. That if we don't have someone telling us otherwise, we'll go through with it. We're all tempted to lean away from the truth when it suits us. We're all tempted to distort the truth when it suits us. But here's the deal. You owe it to yourself to be honest with yourself. Write that down if you're taking notes. You owe it to yourself to be honest with yourself. You owe it to yourself for your life, for your dating life, for your relationship life, with friends and coworkers, everything, to be the absolute best that it can be. And that means that when it comes to dating, it helps to ask yourself the right questions. Okay? It helps to ask yourself the right questions. Number one, is there an area of your life where you find yourself thinking, how can you get away with something? Is there an area of your life where you can see that you're really, really trying to push something that you want, and you are trying to figure out a way to avoid the consequences or even being found out at all? Is there an area of your life where you find yourself thinking that maybe this is true for everyone else, but it's probably not true for you? That's just for other people, it's not true for you. And then third, is there anything that makes you think, I've got this under control, even when everyone around you is telling you differently? You think, I've got this under control, I can handle this, I can do this. But in reality, everything's falling apart around you. We have to have people in our lives willing to be honest with us. But at the same time, we have to be willing to be honest with ourselves. You owe it to yourself to be honest with yourself. David was the king of England. Let me try that again. Not the king of England. That was a whole different thing. Different war. My bad. David was the king of Israel. He's a smart person. But even with all his power and intellect, he got himself into a mess that led to consequences that he dealt with for the rest of his life. He was incredibly smart. He was incredibly powerful. He was incredibly charismatic. He's the dude that almost all guys would want to be. That didn't help him get through his stuff. He had to deal with the mess and the consequences, and he dealt with it for the rest of his life. So, when did David realize how far he'd gotten off track. I mean, because it wasn't whenever he had sex with Bathsheba. It wasn't whenever he found out she was pregnant. It wasn't whenever he brought Uriah back to try and cover it up. It wasn't whenever he got the dude drunk to try and get him to lay with his wife to cover it up. And it wasn't even after he had the guy killed. And it wasn't after he brought Bathsheba in to marry her, to cover it up. It was when a guy named Nathan steps in, and you can read this in chapter 12. Nathan is a prophet. And this prophet, God uses prophets to express his truth to his people among a lot of other things. But in this moment, Nathan comes in and he tells this story to David about a really rich guy and a really poor guy. They had these herds, these flock of sheep and how the rich guy wanted the poor man's flock, but he only had this really, really small, I think there's this one that would feed his family and would do these things. And the rich guy had plenty, but he wanted the poor man's stuff. And so the rich man came in and basically destroyed the poor man's world. And Nathan asked David, what do you think about this? And David got angry. And David said that, this was a large, massive injustice, and there was a huge deal in that it had to be taken care of, and all of these things. And then Nathan essentially tells David, "You're the rich man. You're the one that did this." And David broke. David confesses his sin and begs for forgiveness. See, David listened, and in listening to Nathan and his input into his life, David got clarity that he hadn't been able to get by himself. He got clarity on a situation that he desperately needed, and he wasn't able to get it himself. And so here's what I want you to understand, students and anybody else that's listening to this. We all need a person to be honest with us when we're not being honest with ourselves. Write that down. We all need a person who will be honest with us when we're not being honest with ourselves. So this week I encourage you to do 3 things. Number 1, find your Nathan. Find your Nathan, someone who will speak this truth and honesty into your life, whether or not you want to hear it. It could be a wise friend, a small group leader, a trusted adult, whoever it is, someone who will be straight with you and not sugarcoat anything. They'll be honest. Loving, but honest. Number 2, ask them to help you see areas in your life where you're not being honest with yourself. So find the person and then ask them where you're not being honest with yourself or where you're not facing the truth in your life. And let them, this is huge, and I know it's incredibly difficult and it may even be scary, but you have to understand the importance of transparent accountability. For you to be able to hear what they're saying and for you to respond and be honest in that moment is the only way that you will get the truth and clarity in a situation that you desperately need and cannot find by yourself. It is incredibly important. And the third thing is listen to them. So find your Nathan, ask them to be honest and show some areas in your life. And then the third one is listen to them because they can give you the greatest piece of advice in the world and it means absolutely nothing if you don't listen to it. It means absolutely nothing if you have a great trusted advisor and they have all these incredibly wise things to say and you absolutely ignore them. We have to listen even when it's incredibly difficult to hear and we don't want to do it. And I'm saying we because it's the same in my life. I have to have those people. It's so hard sometimes to hear the things that you don't want to hear. But those things, you've got to listen to them because if you don't, your world will burn around you and you will have no control over it. You owe it to yourself to have a clear view of you and your life and your choices. You owe it to yourself. And one of the best ways to get a real, clear view of your situation is to invite a person who will help you see your situation honestly. It's one of the best ways that you can do that. The reality is that all of us can end up a million places that we didn't want to be. That's the truth. We absolutely can be in a million different places that we thought we'd never be, and it be completely by accident that we're in a situation that we swore we would never be in, all because we never asked tough questions or made tough decisions. Did you hear that? All because we never asked tough questions or made tough decisions. Remember, you owe it to yourself to be honest with yourself. And sometimes that's impossible. And the only way for it to happen is for you to have someone around you willing to be your Nathan when you're acting like David. Hey, students, I love you. Don't get out of here. Stay in your homes. You're under quarantine. See ya.